This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
This is Sarah, and I just want to take a moment to speak to you about this week's sponsor, Favor. Favor, Inc. is a statewide family-led nonprofit 501c3 organization that is committed to empowering families as advocates and partners in improving educational and health outcomes for our children. Favor is the Connecticut state organization of the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. Favor offers a single place for families with children who have medical, mental, emotional, and behavioral health challenges to find information, assistance, and training. To find out more about Favor, please go to favor-ct.org. We are grateful for our opportunity to work with Favor as a sponsor, and now on to the rest of the episode.
This episode is brought to you by Cognivue. Cognivue provides cognitive assessment tools to a broad range of healthcare providers for the early detection of cognitive impairment. Early detection allows patients to address modifiable risk factors sooner, potentially changing the course of cognitive decline. It also allows healthcare providers to develop a plan with the patient and caregiver so the patient can live their best life during their journey. For more information, go to www.cognivue.com. That's www.cognivue.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Chronicles. My name is Sarah, and today I have Edla Prevette with me. Edla is a children's mental health counselor. She's worked with and currently works with neurodivergent children. She's also a former family caregiver for both of her parents. She uses her experiences in both situations and has created a coaching program for adults caring for aging parents. Hello, Edla, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to have you here and share your experiences in two areas that I'm very passionate about. Can you further introduce yourself to my audience?
Yeah, so I have been a mental health counselor for over 20 years, and I started out working just with children in play therapy, and many of them were neurodivergent, which includes a lot of different characteristics: autism spectrum, anxiety, ADHD, just a gamut of things. And then I did a lot of work with their parents, actually, to help them support their children, because some of the things that they were doing as parents to be helpful weren't always helpful. So I did a lot of coaching with the parents around that. Then I began to see adults, actually. They would come in, they'd have their own stressors of their past or dealing with their neurodivergent children and the toll it was taking on them. And simultaneously, maybe 10 years ago, I began caring for my parents, and I took care of them, or I was their primary caretaker for 10 years, or a little over 10 years. And so what happened is I was working in mental health, helping these people with their parenting, with their own, these adults with their parenting and their own adult issues, and helping the children, and simultaneously caretaking. And what I realized through that process is that there's a lot of things available in the community to get support for your aging parents, but there wasn't a lot of information about how to deal with some of the day-to-day challenges and decision making, and getting your parents to be cooperative. And it paralleled a lot with the things that I was telling the parents of neurodivergent children to do. So it was an interesting collision of my personal and professional life that kind of led me down this road of really focusing some attention now on helping adult children of aging parents. So
Awesome.
that's sort of the short answer.
No, thank you so much for sharing that. And I, as someone who's worked in healthcare and senior care for many years and have two neurodivergent kiddos myself, there are a lot of parallels. When you're caregiving for a senior, there were certain skills I needed to use with my grandmother or in long-term care that I have to use with my kids. Even just the most basic generalized skills like patience, active listening,
Yes.
Communication, understanding that behaviors are usually an unmet need.
Right.
These basic things. Can you talk more on those parallels?
Yeah, I think whenever I'm asked this question, that I can definitely give you some of the parallels, but the interesting thing is that I always hesitate sometimes because I never want my clients or listeners to think that you want to engage your parents in sort of a, I don't know, condescending way, right? And so, though there are parallels between the things that you do for children or neurodivergent children from a parenting, caretaking perspective, with modifications, there's some similarities that you can do with your aging parents. And I would say that the thing that I really work with the most on the people that are caring for their children or their parents is really about understanding the person's, in my case right now, the parent's temperament. So my parents had two completely different temperaments. So the skills, and my own children had two completely different temperaments, right? So the strategies might have been the same, let's say giving choices, right? Which is kind of a standard thing that you do with anybody. They're going to be more cooperative if they have a choice. I don't care how old you are, what your circumstances are. But what I would do is I would modify that skill based on my dad's temperament and my mother's temperament. So it's understanding the person that you're caring for's temperament and then figuring out a way to share information with them or give them choices or set limits with them in such a way that you've got a better chance of them being cooperative. I think the other parallel is just really understanding developmentally where they are. So, a lot of people don't understand the developmental stages of the aging population. They don't know what's sort of quote unquote normal. Just like a lot of people don't know sort of the developmental stages of young children. And then if you add the neurodivergence in there, so let's say autism spectrum, it is a spectrum. So the components of that, or the way the kids manifest that, are really different depending on the circumstances, right? So it's the same thing with the adult, the aging parents, as you've really got to understand what is normal and what is part of aging and what might be something else like cognitive decline outside of the realm of typical. And so knowledge is power. If you understand some of that kind of thing, then when you are caring for them, then you take that into consideration. So, what a person does at 60 or 65, they're not going to do that at 80 or 85, right? It's not like 20 years pass and they don't change. So I think those would be the things that are really foundational for me. I really start with that right off the bat because it, like to your point, it creates a better chance of connecting. It creates a better chance of cooperation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I do agree with you that you don't want to talk sometimes the way you would talk to a child. You don't want to talk baby talk to a senior. It's totally inappropriate and completely disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
I could not agree with you more on that. But again, like as far as giving choices, if grandma doesn't want to get dressed, you can say, hey, instead of saying just same thing with a toddler, hey, what shirt do you want to wear today? Do you want to wear your blue shirt or your red shirt? Just like you would do to a toddler who doesn't want to get dressed. Or, sometimes you can even say, I know that this is your favorite shirt. Do you want to wear this?
Yeah.
you
And
know,
I think the other thing too about that is, um, similar strategies like that will work, but you've got to keep in mind, they have a sense of autonomy, right? The elderly population. And so they may just absolutely refuse. And then that's where it comes back to this old idea of picking your battles. I mean, who really cares if they're not going anywhere and they want to stay in their pajamas all day, then it might be okay. But for me, I would also be going, is there something else going on there? To your point, the behavior that you see or the resistance that you see or are experiencing with the person you're caring for may not be the problem. So if people aren't getting dressed or they're not bathing or they're not, there may be some sense of or a loss of hope. There may be some depression. There may be some safety issues that, like their balance isn't good. So changing their shirt might make them feel unsteady. So I think sometimes we have to really be a detective, and we give a choice, but that doesn't mean they're going to take the choice. So then we have to sort of look what's underneath that might be impacting their inability to do this or their resistance to do it. And then sometimes you can regroup and come up with another way to engage them. So yeah.
yeah. No, and I really like acknowledging that too. And like you said, the behavioral aspect of it. And
Mhm.
then what's the root cause of them not wanting to change? I remember one time my grandmother was staying with us and she would not put her pajamas on. My husband was here and she just would not do it. And
Mhm.
I was like, okay, I'm like, just leave her pajamas in the bathroom, fold them up neatly, put them on the counter in the bathroom neatly. So
Mhm.
when she goes in there, if she sees them, maybe she'll put them on. And I was at work at the time. So we have my grandmother, my kids, and I'm working and he's working opposite shifts this weekend. It was really fun juggling. But we did it.
It sounds
And
like a lot. Yeah.
I'm like, and if she puts it on, great. And if she doesn't, when I get home and she's asleep in the chair, I'll say, "Hey, Meme, you look so tired. Let's get you comfortable, and then we can lay you back down." She slept in her later years. She liked to sleep in a recliner,
Yeah.
um, as a lot of seniors do.
Yes.
So I would So I remember that night, and I'm telling my husband this, and my director of nurses is listening to me on the phone saying this while I'm going in like in between residents and stuff like that, and about to go to the next person. I'm like, hold on, I have to deal with the situation, and then um, it was kind of comical in a way because it was like
Yeah.
it was like I'm dealing with it everywhere.
All
But
over. And I think you make a good point about what you were talking about, folding up your grandmother's pajamas and putting them in the bathroom and then, kind of catching her at a good time. I think a lot of this is often trial and error. Like you have to try some things to sort of see what will work. And I also think timing is everything. Like, you have to be, which a little bit comes back to what I was saying about temperament. If they're not moving fast, if they're not a quick to make a decision, and that could be just a natural part of the aging, is just not as quick to make decisions and process information, then it becomes our job as the caretaker to kind of slow down, be more intentional, give them a little more time, and then you've got a better chance of them cooperating with you or doing what you need them to do. So yeah.
I absolutely. And I think also the other part of it was my husband was there, and
Right.
she's like, I'm not getting changed in front of my grandson-in-law, which she knew who he was. She was like, I'm not, and she could change herself. But when I came home and was like, hey, Meme, like, how I didn't mean to wake her up when I came in, but I knew she
Sure,
was.
sure.
And I'm like, it's just me, like, you're okay. And oh, my Sarah, because of course I was the
Right.
favorite granddaughter.
Uh,
Um,
I think that you make a good point too, that it's kind of looking at cultural differences. A lot of women, and it could be even sort of religious kind of upbringings, but women of the 40s or 50s, being around other men is just not comfortable for them. I can remember just even with my grandmother, like a female doctor was just weird to her, that because it was just a different time. So I think you do have to. I was wondering about that when you were sharing. It's like, I wonder if it was because your husband was there and you weren't there. And she's not necessarily going to say that. It's just one of those things that we have to know a little bit about their upbringing and their cultural background so that we can then go, oh, okay, this is not something that is familiar or comfortable to them. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
another good
absolutely.
point. Mm-hmm.
And we didn't tell her she was here so we could keep an eye on her. We told her she was here so she could help us with the babies. And and so she would sit, and folding laundry was something that she was capable of doing. So she folded a basket of clothes 3 times. It was
Yeah. Did
it
your
was
did your
fine. It made her
grandmother have
happy.
Alzheimer's? Did your grandmother have
Yes.
Alzheimer's? Right. And so that's a interesting. I'm glad that I asked that question because some of these things that you're talking about that worked for her would not work for an aging adult that has all their faculties, right? Because they know what you're doing, right? So that's the other piece of it, is that you've got to also know it, like even a child on the spectrum or an anxious child, the tricks that might work for one won't work for another one. I shouldn't say tricks, but the strategies, the strategies, right? And so, yeah, a person that has Alzheimer's, you almost need a specific skill set, because the circumstances are so different than quote unquote typically developing aging parent, which is another part of it. When I'm working with my clients, we kind of look at where they're the person that they're caring for, what their strengths are, and then also what the challenges are, no matter if it's a typical developing or if it's a dementia related illness. You still kind of build on their strengths. So yeah.
Yeah. And I agree with that too. You always advocate for what a person can do, what are their strengths, what can
Mhm.
they do. And again, that's a parallel, right?
Yeah,
With kids.
yes it is.
We build on their strengths without being degrading. And we do that with us
Sure.
as
I was
regular
gonna
adults. I have strengths and weaknesses. My husband has
yeah,
strengths and weaknesses.
exactly.
Most of ours complement each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that that's really a kind of across the lifespan uh, consideration, is that instead of focusing on the things that we can't do, let's focus on what we can do. And then we can help each other with the things that are more challenging, whether it be in your relationships, your work environment, whatever, your parenting, your caretaking, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I'm probably preaching to the choir here, right?
No, but it's a good reminder because we
Yeah.
have days where we all ever when you're taking care of other people, you have days where it's like, I wish I could do XYZ.
Yeah.
And it's not true. So I want to talk more on avoiding power struggles.
Mm-hmm.
In any situation.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, what is a power struggle? What does that look like?
Well, I'm going to, really focus on what a power struggle looks like in the aging population, and gives when it's an adult child um, supporting their parents, because you've got such a role reversal there. And so it presents a little bit more of a challenge. There are some parallels of what you would do with a younger person. But I would say that a power struggle is really when the adult child wants the parent to do something and the aging parent doesn't want to do it, right? Whether it be solve a problem, whether it be purchase something, whether it be a safety issue, there's just this conflict. And so I have sort of 4 steps. Well, 3 steps actually would probably be better, because I use this bookend technique that I teach, and your listeners can get that for free on my website. It's a way to engage your parents to avoid power struggles, and I call it a bookend because there's sort of 3 parts to it. The first part is you need to really be empathic with your adult parent. I mean, your aging parent. So let's say that, you get a call from your um, aging parent, and they want to go to Mexico to visit their friends, and you're thinking, you can't even walk across the apartment. How do you think you're going to get in the airport and get on a plane and get to Mexico, right? And that might be what you say out loud. Well, there starts the power struggle. Mom says she wants to go to Mexico to visit her friend, and you're like, are you kidding me? And then the conflict starts. So it would be more, the first part would be, first thing that you do as their caretaker is when they say something that you think there's no way, is you just have an empathic response. And the easiest way to do that is to say, it sounds like you really want to go to Mexico. You think that would be a great trip. You just accept the information and add a feeling word to go with it. I can tell you're really excited about the prospect of going to Mexico, right? Right then, you've already brought the energy down. You've brought down so that they feel like you're right there with them. And then the sort of middle part of the bookend, and this is the quick version, but the middle part of the bookend is like, okay, Mom, well, if you want to go to Mexico, what are the things we have to get in order? And so then you start, just like you would do any other trip, you start thinking about how are we going to get there? How much is it going to cost? And that sort of thing. And then once you go through that start to go through that process, oftentimes they will realize that it's just not, and this is based on a true story that I had with someone, but they'll sort of realize that's not really a good idea, and this has happened a couple of different times, but one time that it happened, a similar story, was once the parent realized how much it was going to cost to do this trip they wanted to do, that was like, I'm not spending that much money to fly to Mexico, right? But then the other person was like, wow, that's really scary that I have to spend that much time in the airport. And they were able to realize that their mobility wasn't strong. So then they ended up kind of coming up with the fact that it wasn't a good idea. And then the back end of the bookend, the last step is to really think about, to circle back with them. And praise isn't really the right word, but just encourage them. You were really excited about going to Mexico, but after some thought, you realized it might not be the best idea. I know that was a hard decision for you, right? So you make them feel empowered by kind of wrapping it up and thinking about, kind of recapping it. And I did this with my parents so often. My mom really more than my dad, because she always had some complaints or some crisis or something that she wanted to do. And not all the time, but probably 80% of the time, it just wasn't a great idea. But instead of going, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, or why would you want to do that? Or Mom, that's not safe. Instead of leading with that, I led with the empathic response. And I teach this so much, and I really can't encourage your listeners enough to go grab that. It's got scripts, it's got examples, and it's got words that you can actually use until it becomes more natural. So that's the way you avoid the power struggle, is try to just not get into it to begin with by having an empathic response.
And what if you like slip up and you're let's say
Sure.
because we're human,
Yes.
we're all human, and you're
Yes.
like completely shocked, and all your strategies and all your skills blank your mind, and you're like, what do you mean you want to get married again, or what, or whatever,
Well,
whatever,
that's a good one. I haven't had that yet,
what do
but
you mean you want to marry the mailman again? Like,
well, there's one thing I think that's good about that, or to sort of do that. I mean, first of all, if it's in real time, you can't, and you're like, and you say something impulsive like that, you can always say, I'm sorry, Mom, I was just surprised. That's not what you needed to hear from me. And then you can regroup. But really, the other thing that I teach my clients to do is to anticipate, be proactive. So one of the things that I used to do, my mother was predictably unpredictable, if that makes sense. So I knew that whenever I went to see her or talk to her on the phone, that something could be coming out of left field, right? So I had two strategies. One is, if she called, I would let it go to voicemail so I could hear what she wanted. And then I could get my personal composure, and then I'd call her back. The second thing that I would do is if I was visiting her, I would sit in my car for a few minutes and just sort of talk to myself, kind of psych myself up. You've got this. You know how to handle if she's feeling anxious. You can do this. If you're not sure what to say, just tell her you need to think about it. So I would really kind of pump myself up. And I have a lot of different strategies that I use with my clients about what's going to work for them. Because some people are long distance, some people live with the people that they care for, some people visit, they're in close. And so we kind of come up with different ways to sort of find your composure or to regroup if you screw up, if you don't do it right, which, like you said, we're all human, so it's inevitable.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I kind of want to get in a little more into the regrouping. Like, let's say you're completely off guard. You forget all your skills. Mom, what do you mean you want to get married again?
Right.
And you're not thrilled, and it's all there. I'm just using that as an example because that could
That's
be
fine.
like the
That's
most
fine. I can get, yeah,
that
no,
could be the
that would
most
be
shocking thing you could hear
right,
from a
right,
90-year-old,
right,
Um
right.
and you lose all your strategy, and then you're in that struggle of you can't tell me what to do. I'm your mother, and then what do you do if you end up somehow in the midst of that?
Well, and that's where so much of the coaching, because you really want to try to have things in place that you avoid that. So I would say, let's say that you're like, are you kidding me? You want to get married again? This is not cool. And if she comes back at you, with whatever she says, I'm your mom, I'll do whatever I want, then you're like, well, no, you won't do whatever I want, whatever, however it goes. Somebody's got to step off the dance floor. I call it. It's like a family dance. Somebody's got to step off the dance floor. And at any time during that exchange, whether it's 3 back and forth exchanges or 14 back and forth exchanges, you as the adult child can step off that dance floor. It's very similar to what you said about when you're parenting. Sometimes you just don't get on the dance floor with your kid, quote, the metaphorical dance floor with your kid, to get out of the power struggle. And that might mean going to the bathroom just to so you can take a deep breath and regulate. That might be, you know what, we are getting nowhere with this conversation. I will call you later. So there's always an opportunity to step out and step back and stop. Because what happens, the more you go back and forth with them, I wish your listeners could see me, because the more and more you go back and forth, it just escalates. And then you're up here at level 10, just screaming and yelling at each other. And that does so much damage to your relationship. And then everybody chooses a side and nobody's willing to bend. Right. But if you go down here, and if you can be proactive and avoid it altogether, or if you can have an empathic response, and you might be able to help your mom realize that might not be a good idea. But if you keep going at it, you can still step out and be the adult and the caretaker and say, okay, this isn't going anywhere, and just literally remove yourself from the situation till you can get your own self-composure. Is that more what you're talking about?
Yeah. And I appreciate that. Thank you, because I know it happens, and when you're caught off guard sometimes, no matter how perfect you are, you can be caught off guard with information or with a situation, and
Right.
you're startled and you don't respond the way that you were trained to, or the way that you want to.
That's right. And I think you make a good point too. What you and I might say as professionals, when we're dealing with our own kids or our own family members, I mean, we don't always get it right, but we have a different kind of relationship with them, whether we have a different kind of emotional response, emotional connection with them. So absolutely, you're not going to get it right sometimes, but if you maintain this sense of trying to cooperate and trying to connect, then when you have these disagreements or these power struggles, there's a way to repair. There's ways to fix it. And then it comes down to, I mean, you know, most, I guess some people are okay with being blindsided, but most people don't like to be blindsided. And then for me, it also comes down to asking yourself, is this a safety issue, right? Is there a financial safety issue? Is there a emotional safety issue? Is there physical safety issue. And, like if your mom lives by herself and the mailman comes all the time and they want to get married and there's not a safety issue, well, who are we to say? And so sometimes getting your composure and getting over being blindsided, then you can go, okay, maybe this isn't as unreasonable as it sounds to me. And I don't know about get marrying the mailman, but you know what I'm saying. It's real situational. It's real because a lot of elderly people remarry. It's very common, and it's just they want the companionship.
Yeah. No, and that's absolutely true. And I've seen it go kind of both ways with families where families were like, hey, you know what? You guys are happy. Good for you. And I've seen families like, nope, you said you were going to love my dad till the day you die. How dare you love someone else now?
Yeah. And then that's where it really gets into, and I do some of that with my coaching clients. That would kind of tip into more therapy stuff, like what is the underlying part of, in the family history of not sort of wanting to accept your parent where they are and what their needs might be. And, oftentimes when you hear things like that, they haven't grieved the loss of the other parent, and they're holding on to the past. And that's a hard thing. And, and you can talk about that, but that's definitely sort of kid gloves. You have to treat that with sort of kid gloves because it's just not as clear as what the aging person needs and what you feel like as their child, because you'll turn into a 10-year-old in a quick minute sometimes when you're talking to your parents, even though you might be 45 years old, you can revert right back into those younger ages. So,
yeah. And I think that that's actually really good to recognize too. It's like, is this my problem? Is this actually my problem and not their problem, or not a real problem? Is this something I'm fabricating or a reflection of something I'm going through?
And that's the point that I was making in the beginning, where when you start caring for your aging parent and you start doing Google searches, you find all these things about, how to get a will written or how to find a placement for them or how to get, meals on wheels, but you don't, like these day-to-day things that come up. And this is a perfect example. And you don't know what to do with some of these curveballs that you get. And which is really why I do this work that I do, is so that I can share information with people and people can access me or someone that does similar work to me to help with, what do I do when? Why am I responding this way? How do I help them do something different? And that's not many Google searches have that information for you. So
yeah, no, I agree. And that's your coaching business. And also, with you having the background as a mental health counselor, in addition to that coaching experience, that's going to be with the personal experience. Again, that's going to be really helpful for your clients. Do you want to talk more about your coaching business and basically your models and things?
Yeah, I have a framework that I use in my coaching business to sort of help identify the problems that each family is having or each caretaker is having. And then we come up with sort of goals and strategies, and we work on those through this framework that I've created. And I have packages, like they can come once, for like a 90-minute session, and we'll do what we can. But I think sort of a 4 to 8 week coaching package kind of can get them a little better trajectory. And then sometimes they'll come just for a monthly check-in. But I'm also beginning, and in fact, I don't know when this episode is going to air, but I want to do some group programs because they're a couple of different reasons. One, they're a little more affordable for people. Two, it gives them a community. And three, it's something that I can facilitate in such a way that they're not only getting the perspective from their specific situation, but they're getting perspectives from a lot of different situations. So if things come up along this caretaking journey. So I also offer group programs as well. And then, like I have a lot of free resources that people can access on my website.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And are your services local or national?
All over. I do it virtually. Yeah. So, I mean, do I have local clients? I'm sitting in my office now. Yeah, I have people that come in to see me that are local, but I would say the majority of the people that I see do not live here where I live. I see them virtually. Yeah. And the group programs are virtually too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Mhm.
And I want to talk a little bit more, and I know we kind of touched on this, like effective communication
Oh,
and
yeah.
things like that. And I know you talk about that in your coaching session. What is effective communication?
Well, let's see. It's it's easier to tell you what it's not. It's not accusatory. It's not judgmental. It's not critical, right? It's not a hidden agenda, right? So if you take which is, if you think about when we're dealing with other people, we do a lot of those things when we're trying to get them to cooperate with us. And what we've learned is that it often backfires. So it's more of sort of reframing that kind of thing. That's where you're really like, I'm coming into this with an open spirit, with an open heart, with a cooperative sort of mindset, that we can sit down and we don't have to agree on everything. We can disagree on some things, but we can come together on some sort of compromise. A lot of people weren't raised to communicate that way. I think that, our country right now is so polarized that people can't even sit down and have conversations and communicate about hard topics. And so I think it also, I would say another component of effective communication is your own personal motivation to be an effective communicator. You've got to want to do something different. You've got to want to engage your aging parents in such a way that you stay connected with them. I was talking to a client not too long ago. Her mother, and this was her mother recently passed, and she was feeling so much guilt because she said, I'm relieved. I'm so relieved. And part of that was because their relationship had gotten so toxic at the end, because they were, aging and dying are just not always that easy. And she was dealing with so much guilt about the relief that she had that her mother had died. And so you've really got to have a level of motivation to want to be a clearer communicator, so that the last 10 or whatever years of your parents' life, though there'll be some stumbles and things, hard decisions, but it's still grounded in a place of connection. So yeah, it's really you've really got to have that motivation and that will to do that. And then, and depends on the person. Some people might have some communication skills or aspects of communication that they're better at than others. Like we said, well, let's focus on that strength, and then I can help them improve the things that are more challenging for them. Like you said, blindsided. Some people do fine when they're blindsided. It doesn't rattle them. But other people, we need to prepare for being blindsided so that they can communicate more effectively. And then
Absolutely.
sometimes I just teach a formula, and I was like, this is going to feel weird to talk like this, because it sounds so robotic and kind of inauthentic. But once you get used to the formula, and you can kind of make it your own voice, and then it feels more authentic. So.
Absolutely. And I think that also, though, like these skills, like the communication and the avoiding power struggles, you can use this. You mentioned communicating with people with different sides of the aisle on you, or different
Sure.
beliefs or whatever. You can use this when you're dealing with, a difficult relative at Thanksgiving, or a relative with opposing viewpoints who's bringing up stuff that like nobody really wants to get into that day. You can use these skills in multiple experiences through your life, not just with your parents, not just with
Absolutely.
your children.
Right. Absolutely, you can. I mean, it's a skill that's just a valuable skill to have across the lifespan for lots of different reasons.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And
Sure.
we're kind of getting to my favorite question to ask my guests right now.
Okay.
What is your favorite form of self-care?
Well, I think I have a couple of things I want to say about that. Um, First of all, I love to go out and have a night dinner with my girlfriends, just laugh and be silly. And so that was probably one of my favorite things to do because they'd let me talk about, what was going on with my parents, but then mostly we just laugh and be silly and cut up. But unfortunately, that wasn't often an option. And as you well know, caretaking is a relentless 24/7 kind of thing sometimes. So I do what I call, and I talk to my clients about this a lot too. I call them self-care snacks, where you find 5 minutes, 7 minutes, where it might be, like I like to drink tea. And so I would just make a cup of tea and I'd have different kinds. So depending on what I needed, I would just really try to be present and just drinking a cup of tea, like smelling it and feeling the warmth on my hands, just some of those grounding exercises. I might just go out for a stroll, even if it's just around the block. And I'm always about doing those things really intentional so that it does feel like self care. And if you're doing those, you've got to look at the senses. So if you're having a stroll, how does the temperature feel? What do you see? What do you smell? And that just intentionally brings you back down because when you're caring for someone, you might only have 5 minutes. You might not have, I can go out with my girlfriends once a week, right? So those would be I guess that's two things or maybe more. That's sort of my approach for
That's
myself
okay.
and for the people that I work with.
That's okay. And I love it. We do a similar technique, as you're saying when you're walking with the senses. We do a similar technique with my son.
Mm-hmm.
And we practice this. We practice this in the car. What are 5 things that you can see right now?
Right.
What are 4 things that you can feel? What are 3 things that you can hear? What are 2 things that you can smell? And what's 1 thing that you can taste? And
That's
we
great for anxiety. That right there is great for anxiety, just to bring people back into the present because your brain really can't do two things at one time like that. So by taking that sensory input, um, for lots of different reasons, that strategy works super well.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
use it on myself. I find
Yeah.
myself using it now because I've practiced it with him so much.
Yep. Yeah.
And it works. And sometimes if he's like in a really bad space inside, we go outside. I
Oh,
go
yeah.
outside on the porch and
Mm-hmm.
do your 5 senses and come back
Mm-hmm.
in and
Mm-hmm.
tell me what you got
Yeah,
and remove.
any kind of grounding exercise or mindfulness exercise, your listeners may or may not know what those are, but yeah, that's the kind of thing that you're talking about. Anything that can sort of regulate the nervous system. So that then sort of fills your bucket to do whatever you've got to do next. It's
And
great.
you can do that with almost anyone.
And
You can
anywhere,
you can
anyone and anywhere.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And getting a friend and having time with friends is also super important. And one of
Mm-hmm.
my other favorite self-care techniques. And if you don't have the luxury of going out, have a friend over for the cup of tea,
Yeah.
or say, hey, I'll make dinner if you bring the wine or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
And I think you make a good point right there. It's almost like you need a self-care toolbox, like just a whole bunch of things. So if you can't do one, maybe you can do the other one. But again, it's that intentionality. It's being intentional about building your support system, building your self-care practices, learning educating yourself on adult development or aging development of the aging population, educating yourself on um, well, maybe not educating yourself, but thinking about your parents' temperament. All those things work together as a cohesive whole to make the caretaking journey, I don't know, just more pleasurable because it's hard work. It's super hard work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And my final question, where
Sure.
can my audience find you for more information?
All right. Yeah. If you go to edlaprevette.com, you'll see all the things that I offer. You'll be able to grab the 180 Bookend Technique workbook that I talked a little bit about. Depending on when this airs, you'll be able to read about the group program And you can reach out to me there at edlaprevette.com. I'm also on Facebook at 180 with Edla Prevette and Instagram at 180_Edla Prevette. And that's all a word. It's not the number 180. It's the word 180. So yeah. And you'll have my name spelled in the show notes, because that's probably the hardest thing, is for people to spell my name correctly and find me. But yeah, reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Edla.
Yeah.
And we will link all of your website and stuff in our show notes,
Great.
and any social medias that you'd like to have linked also.
Okay.
So my audience can get in touch if they have any questions or anything.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for being here and taking time to chat with me today.
Absolutely. Take care.
You too. And that will wrap up this week's episode of Caregiver Chronicles. I want to thank my audience for listening this week. If you liked this episode or it resonated with you, please check out Edla's stuff. It'll be linked in the show notes. You can also share this episode with a friend if you know someone who could benefit from this information. If you want to support us, you can go to our website, Stelmach Brand Media. There's links for that there. But really, the best way to help us out and support our show is to share it with all of your friends. And with that, we will see you next week.